Hello again, everybody. Welcome to another exciting episode of Random Vlogging. So I really hurt my nose there. Wow. Ow. I just rammed my glasses into my face. Hi. First random vlogging of the new year. And today I wanted to talk about something that's really pissing me off right now. Yes, this is going to be a random vlogging rant. Don't you feel lucky? Today I want to talk about terrorism. Terrorism specifically in who we call terrorists, which is everybody. Everybody's a terrorist now. Every single person is a terrorist. Oh my God. No, what I'm talking about right now, and I've seen this happen literally every time something bad happens that people don't agree with, the people that actually did the bad thing are now terrorists. Terrorists. Everybody's a terrorist. Terrorist. You're a terrorist. And people are taking over stuff in Oregon are terrorists. And then people are shooting people are terrorists. And then the president is a terrorist. Everybody is a terrorist. And I really hate it. Terrorism at its most, to quote from our Wikipedia page, because that's obviously good. In its broadest sense, terrorism is any act designed to cause terror. That is an insanely broad definition of the word terrorism. It is as broad as you can get for terrorism, and yet probably 90% of the people that we label as terrorists do not fit into that definition. For example, anytime somebody commits a mass shooting, which remarkably enough is actually not that often. And those articles that claim that we, like last year we had, what was it, like 350 or 370 mass shootings. Those numbers are inflated by using very poor definition of what a quote-unquote mass shooting is. And they also contain a lot of things that the FBI and everyone else that actually really tracks this stuff would say, no, that's not a mass shooting. That was gang violence or something similar to that. So anyway, everyone that does anything with a gun nowadays is a terrorist. To give you an example, recently there has been, and to be 100% honest, I don't actually know everything that's going on in Oregon right now. But my very basic understanding is that there are these two guys who set fire to federally owned land that was adjacent to their grazing property where they let their cattle graze, were sent to jail a while ago for doing that because technically arson on federal property is, I believe it's a felony. It may just be a misdemeanor, but I believe it's a felony. So yeah, they went to jail for it. They got out recently, and then a judge decided that they hadn't been sentenced correctly and sent them back to jail. Let's ignore the obvious legal ramifications of the idea of a double jeopardy and technically being convicted twice for the same crime, and how that kind of violates our criminal justice system in general. And again, I don't actually understand why it happened or anything. I know the very minimum facts, so there's probably a lot more there that I don't understand, and which is why it's technically legal for them to be sentenced twice for the same crime. Anyway, so what happened is a group of people calling themselves a militia went and actually took over a wildlife preserve building in Oregon. As kind of a idea of defiance against the federal government, basically taking back what they believe the federal government stole from them. Now, everybody, every liberal person on Twitter right now is defining them as terrorists. These are terrorists because they're doing terrifying things, which they're not. Again, if we use the super awesome, amazingly broad idea of terrorism, it is something that is designed, it is any act designed to cause terror. Meaning, the purpose behind the act has to be to make people afraid. The purpose behind this has nothing to do with making people afraid, and has everything to do with standing up to what they perceive as a corrupt government. They're not trying to scare the government, they are making a stand. This happens literally all over the world. Whether we are talking about the thing Les Mis was made about, was it the student riots or the student protests back in France where a bunch of them died? Like, it's literally the same thing. These are all people that are attempting to stand up against a regime they feel has become totalitarian. They're not doing this to scare people. Terror is not in any aspect of what they are doing. Suicide bombings are designed to scare people. They're designed to scare people on a number of levels. One, they're designed to scare people for the idea that they may lose their lives because someone decides to blow themselves up. They're also designed to scare people with the idea that there are people out there that are so passionate about their beliefs that they're willing to go out and commit indiscriminate murder while killing themselves at the exact same time. That is what terrorism is. A bunch of people getting guns and taking over a building in an attempt to stand up to a totalitarian regime, whether or not that is true, is not terrorism. It is an act of defiance. It is an act of rebellion. It is not an act of terrorism. Someone going into like the mass shooter that went on that spree, I believe is on a college campus in California. When you look at his manifesto, he wasn't doing it to scare people. He wasn't doing it. He was doing it specifically because he felt that these women there were not giving him what he deserved. So it had nothing to do with scaring people and everything to do about taking revenge on people he felt that wronged him. Again, not terrorism, because the entire point of it was not to scare people or to cause some sort of change due to people being afraid. It was specifically an act of revenge. And if you look at most of these mass shootings and things like that, the idea of terror is not the purpose of them. The purpose of them is revenge. The purpose of them sometimes is just attention. The purpose of them sometimes is, they have a term, I believe it's called suicide by a police shooting or something like that, where basically you go up to the police or someone that's armed, threaten them, and give them no choice but to shoot you. That is a large portion. These are not terrorists. These are very deranged people. These are people that need massive amounts of help, and they're people that have done horrible, horrendous things. They're not terrorists. There's a really interesting book. What is the book? It's called Inside Terrorism by Bruce Hoffman. The word terrorist has basically become a pejorative term that we apply to anyone we don't agree with. And I think that is a massively bad thing. That is a horrendous thing because it's watering down a word that should be used against very horrible, disgusting people. Terrorists in general are horrendous people. They really, really are, because they are preying on one of our deepest weaknesses as humans in general, our fear. Fear has the ability to make you do crazy, insane things. Fear can cause you to lose your mind. Fear can actually affect you on a chemical level. It can affect you on a biological level. It can, fear can actually kill you. It's actually very difficult for it to happen, but it's very, very possible. So these are people that use one of our greatest weaknesses against us to get their own their own ideas put forth, and that's who we should be using it. We should not be using this against everyone in the world that we don't agree with. He makes an amazing point. He goes, at one point at least, everyone agrees terrorism is a pejorative term. It is a word with intrinsically negative connotation that is generally applied to one's enemies and opponents, or to those with whom one disagrees or would otherwise prefer to ignore. What is called terrorism, Brian Jenkins has written, thus seems to depend on one's point of view. Use of the term implies a moral judgment, and if one party can successfully attach the label terrorist to its opponent, then it has indirectly persuaded others to adopt its moral viewpoint. Hence, the decision to call someone or label some organizations terrorist becomes almost unavoidably subjective, depending largely on whether one sympathizes or opposes, whether one sympathizes with or opposes the person, group, cause concerned. If one identifies with the victims of violence, for example, then the act is terrorism. If, however, one identifies with the uh, perpetrator, the violent act is regarded in a more sympathetic, if not positive, or at the worst, an ambivalent light, and it is not terrorism. That is an absolutely perfect example as to how we treat the word terrorism now. Terrorism has nothing to do with terror. Terrorism and being labeled a terrorist has everything to do with falling on the other side of a political line, and that is bullshit. It's bonkers. Stop calling these people terrorists. First of all, it gives them a hell of a lot more authority than they really need. Second of all, it waters down and deludes the fact that there are real terrorists out there doing unspeakable acts. And yet we're focused on a bunch of people that have taken over a wildlife preserve building, which, by the way, have not caused any property damage other than the two guys that burned the federal land. Beyond that, they've not caused any property damage. They have not looted anything. There have not been any car fires, and no one is asking FEMA for $20 million to pick up the pieces. So, I'm really, really tired of us just throwing around the word terrorist whenever we have somebody that we don't agree with. It's stupid, it's dumb, and it needs to stop. So what I would like to do today is I would like to turn things on a more positive light. Whether or not you agree with people doing insane things, everybody in the world has somebody that loves them. They do. All these people that are in Oregon, they have a lot of people that support them. They have a lot of people that don't support them. But every single one of those people has somebody in the world that loves them. And I think if we would stop focusing on labeling people as terrorists and things like that, and focus on the fact that these are real life human beings that have gotten to the point where they feel this is the only way they can achieve the goal that they want, and start focusing on them more as people that just need somebody to help them figure out a more constructive way to get the ideas that they want out there, this world would be an insanely better place. So what I am going to do today is I am going to find every language that I can attempt to pronounce, and I'm going to teach you all how to say the phrase, someone loves you, in those languages. Because all around the world, people are doing horrible, disgusting things because they feel that that is the only way they can get whatever goal they have across. And sometimes that goal is to cause terror. Those people are terrorists. Everybody else doing horrible, unspeakable things where the goal is not to inspire terror is not a terrorist. They are simply someone making a bad choice that hurts other people. And we need to stop defining them as that. So in English, the phrase is someone loves you. English is spoken all over the world. In English, it's one of the primary secondary languages of most of the countries because it is a trade language. It's spoken all over the world because it is a trade language. Because of that, those of us that speak English as our primary language tend to get a little bit inflated because just about everybody else in the world in most developed countries speak at least some, if not are fluent in English. English is a very useful language to learn no matter where you live. However, there are literally thousands of different languages out there. I'm going to go through a few that either I speak or am familiar enough with that I don't think I'm going to completely butcher the pronunciation. The first one I am going to give you is French. French, for a while, was a trade language in Europe. If you spoke either English or French, you could go to, you could go to just about any country in Europe and find somebody that spoke your language rather easily. French is a language that I used to be passively fluent in. I am no longer because I don't have the ability to practice. Someone loves you in French is quelqu'un t'aime, which literally translated is someone likes you, technically. But in French, the phrase "je t'aime" is translated as "I love you." And when you say "I love you" to someone in French, you generally say "je t'aime." So in French, it is "quelqu'un t'aime." So if you have a French-speaking person that needs to know that somebody loves them, you just turn to them and say "quelqu'un t'aime." Somebody loves you. The next one, because I have so many friends that speak this, and I had my first girlfriend who's fluent in it, is German. I have a ton of German friends. German itself is not quite widely as spoken as French is for a number of reasons, but it's still a very useful language to know in Europe. There are a lot of Germanic-based languages. English itself is Germanic-based, so the word structure and sentence structure and syntax are very, very similar. In French, someone loves you is jemand liebt dich. I'm going to try that again. Jemand liebt dich. I do not speak German very well, but I used to sing in it when I was in college. It's actually a very beautiful language when you learn how to speak it correctly. Especially for English-speaking people that are learning German, it sounds like an insanely guttural and very coarse language, especially on your throat. But once you learn how to speak it correctly and fluently, it's actually a very pretty language. It's one of the reasons Brahms wrote so many things in German as opposed to Latin or Italian, which was kind of the standard at the time. So that's German. One more time. Jemand liebt dich. Now I'm going to go to, I want to try Chinese, but it's really, really difficult. Unique thing about, I'm going to go Japanese because I actually can pronounce Japanese, remarkably enough. I have no idea why Japanese is easier for me to pronounce than Chinese, but I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that in Japanese, they don't actually have consonant sounds on their own. In their quote-unquote alphabet, every consonant is paired with every vowel sound. They don't just have specific consonants. And in general, you tend to pronounce when it's written out, you tend to, not in kanji, you tend to pronounce every single letter. So someone loves you in Japanese is Daraka ga anata o aishimasu. I'll try that one more time. Daraka ga anata o aishimasu. So if you have someone, Japanese is a major, major trade language. Half of our electronics come from Japan. And they have an amazing booming economy. So there are a lot of people around the world that speak Japanese, specifically in nerd culture, because video games come from Japan, as well as anime and manga. So Japanese is a very good nerd language to learn. So if you meet someone that is just making poor decisions or just really needs it, turning to them and saying, Daraka ga anata o aishimasu, will tell them that somebody loves them. I'm going to try Chinese, but again, there's a lot of diphthongs and bizarre letters, so I don't know if I'm going to be able to pronounce this. I'm going to have my computer read it to me.
有人爱你.
So there's like 27 letters in here, and you only have like 4 sounds. It's almost like Welsh. But if I heard it correctly, it's Yoren ai ni is Chinese for someone loves you. Now, they don't actually identify whether this is Mandarin or Cantonese or one of the other like dozen different dialects of Chinese there are. So I have no idea which dialect of Chinese this is. But if I'm pronouncing it correctly, it sounds like Yoren ai ni is Chinese for someone loves you. Chinese is another trade language. Mandarin and Cantonese, Mandarin a little bit more than Cantonese, because China has such an insane economy, and there's such a large superpower. Chinese is a very, very useful thing. So if you see people that obviously speak one of the dialects of Chinese, and they're making poor decisions or just need to know that somebody loves them, you can say, Yuren ai ni. One of the most interesting languages that I've come across is Russian. I think Russian is an incredibly unique language. The Slavic alphabet in general is, I find, fascinating, and the actual language itself is very, very cool. I enjoy Russian. I don't speak anywhere near enough of it to even be considered partially fluent, but I find it a very cool language. In Russian, which I'm going to have him read for me, because again, it's actually very difficult to read Slavic alphabet when you don't understand it.
Кто-то любит тебя.
So, and I'm going to butcher this because this is probably one of the more difficult Russian phrases I've learned, is кто любит тебя. Кто-то любит тебя. Кто-то любит тебя. Кто-то любит тебя is someone loves you in Russian. Russia is one of the largest countries in the world. A lot of Eastern Europe and the Slavic languages in general can trace a common ancestor back, or a common language ancestor back to Russian, or whatever Russian came from. So the Slavic languages in general, if you see someone from Eastern Europe that just needs someone to tell them that somebody loves you, it's кто любит тебя, or something similar to that. I'm fairly certain I've just butchered Russian in general. If you actually speak Russian, I apologize for destroying your language. I'm surprised how difficult that phrase is, because I know a lot of other phrases in Russian and they're much easier to pronounce. Another one that a lot of us don't want to hear, because we have basically defined an entire area of the world as nothing more than terrorists, which again is used in ways that we shouldn't be, is Arabic. Arabic is spoken all over the Middle East. It's again, it's another trade language. In Arabic, it also has a very unique script that I can't read, because I've never learned how to read Arabic. But someone loves you in Arabic is...
شخص ما يحبك.
Sounds like شخص ما يحبك. So again, شخص ما يحبك. Arabic was eventually, again, all over the Middle East. It's one of the most common languages there. Yes, if you see someone from Middle Eastern descent who obviously doesn't speak English and really needs to know that somebody loves them, you can say شخص ما يحبك. And again, if you speak Arabic and I've just butchered their language, I apologize. So the entire point behind this, guys, is we need to stop using the word terrorist so liberally. And I do find it absolutely hilarious right now that liberals are the ones that are using it so liberally, even though technically that's two different definitions of the same word. So that is hilarious. We need to stop calling people terrorists that aren't terrorists. Just because somebody does something that scares you does not make them a terrorist. Your reaction to something does not change what it is that was done. This is the same reason we're having fights about gun control. It has nothing to do with protecting people anymore. It has everything to do with the fact that there are a lot of people out there that are afraid of guns. And they figure the best way to not be afraid of guns is to get rid of them. So they have nothing to be afraid of anymore. Guns are scary things. There are a lot of scary things in this world, though. Trying to find ways to get rid of the scary things has never been the best way to deal with them. Learning how to deal with your fear of something and learning how to not let it control you is the correct way to deal with something that scares you. And it's the healthy way to deal with something that scares you. I deal with things that scare me literally every single day of my life. It's one of the joys of having anxiety. I have terror attacks where I will become absolutely convinced, or at least my body will, that something is trying to kill me. And it will mess me up majorly. And I have spent most of my life learning how to deal with that and how to get over the fact that my body every so often reacts in a way I'd like it not to. This is what we need to do. Let's stop declaring anyone that we disagree with as a terrorist, and let's start focusing on figuring out what is really happening. What is the actual motivation behind that, behind this action that scares us? and learn how to treat these people as real, live human beings. Beings that somebody out there loves and cares for and wants the best for. Because everybody in the world has somebody that loves and cares for them. And we need to start remembering that. Just because we don't like someone doesn't mean they're a terrorist and they're inhuman and we can say all the nasty things we want about them and then make them, and then treat them absolutely horrible and horrendous and do horrible, unspeakable things to them because, again, we have dehumanized them. We have turned them into something that doesn't deserve to be treated well. You're a terrorist. You deserve to die in the most horrible, unspeakable way possible. We need to stop that, guys. Everybody in the world has somebody that loves them. Everybody in the world has somebody that loves them. Go to Google Translate, type in "someone loves you," and look at all the different ways you can say that in the, I don't know, like 60 some odd languages it's got in there. And those are just a fraction of the languages that exist in this world. Every single one of them has the ability to say somebody loves you or I love you. Stop this, guys. It's so stupid. It's so pointless. This is dumb. You don't agree with what's happening in Oregon? Absolutely fantastic. Do something about it. Don't label them as a terrorist and go on tirades about horrible, disgusting people they are. Figure out what's actually going on there and come up with a way to deal with it. They don't like the fact that the government is taking over land and taking it away from farmers. It's absolutely fine. They are 100% in their rights to feel that way. Now, is there a better way to do it? I've got absolutely no idea. I actually don't understand what's going on over there. There's so much misinformation going around that it's impossible to find out unless you physically go out there, knock on that wildlife refuge door, and go, hey, listen, can you tell me what's going on here? And then go to the government and ask them, hey, can you tell me what's going on here? Because both of them are only going to give you about a quarter of the truth. And the rest of it, you got to try and figure out on your own by trying to piece together the missing information. That's the world we live in. You want to know why we live in that world? Because we keep labeling people as terrorists instead of trying to figure out what the fuck is going on. All right, that is all for me today. I will see you guys tomorrow for the next episode of the Kingdom of the Kale Isles on my Twitch channel. All right? Bye-bye!